My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 32. My entire life changed last month at a family dinner in Seattle. The residence my cherished grandparents willed to me became a battlefield, with my privileged sister and unsupportive parents as combatants. They had always provided her with everything while I struggled to make my own way. That night, she struck me across the face, forcibly pushed me out the door, and hissed, "Leave my house." My parents remained seated, their gazes cold and indifferent as I staggered into the yard, my arm bruised and my heart pounding. I stood beneath the streetlight, watching the locked door, my breath a mist in the cold air. A week later, a parcel arrived on their doorstep. My mother frantically called my phone 45 times, her voice pleading that it was all a misunderstanding. I responded with a 3-word text, "You leave now." Before I get into the full story, I'm curious about your current time and location. I'm always pleased to know how widely my story travels. A week prior, I had been at my apartment's dining table in Seattle, setting plates for a family meal I hoped might heal old grievances. I'd spend hours preparing lasagna from my grandma Beatrice's recipe, the scent of garlic and tomato filling my small living space. My sister, 3 years my senior, showed up late with my parents, her eyes appraising my humble home with a familiar disdain. My mother, Martha Vance, offered a pre-packaged dessert, grumbling about traffic. My father, David Vance, gave a slight nod before immediately asking for a beer. I forced a smile, placing appetizers, determined to maintain peace. The conversation began lightly, centered on my parents' book club. My sister, Carly Vance, lounged in her seat, scrolling on her phone, contributing almost nothing. I mentioned my latest programming project, a budgeting app I'd recently proposed at work. Martha dismissed it, saying, "That's sweet, Eleanor, but let's talk about Carly's new business." Carly then launched into the tale of her struggling startup, a fitness app that had failed to secure funding. "The investors just don't grasp my vision," she lamented, flipping her hair. David nodded sympathetically. "You'll find the right one, sweetheart." I bit my lip, well accustomed to their favoritism. The atmosphere shifted when Martha brought up the home my grandparents, Beatrice Sterling and Arthur Sterling, had left. To me, "Have you renovated the kitchen yet?" she inquired, her tone overly casual. Carly was saying it would be perfect for her. I froze, a forkful of food halfway to my mouth. "It is my house," I stated calmly. Carly leaned forward, her voice sharp. "You don't need all that space, Eleanor. I'm starting from scratch after my app failed. It would be put to better use by me." My chest tightened. "Grandma and Grandpa left it to me, not you." David cleared his throat. "It's a family property. You should consider sharing, Eleanor," Martha interjected. "Carly's in a difficult position." "You're doing fine," I pushed back, my voice steady despite my rising anger. "Fine? I've earned everything I have while you've handed Carly whatever she wanted." Carly's expression grew dark. "Don't act superior just because you write apps no one uses." The insult stung, but I stood my ground. "At least I don't expect handouts." The table fell silent. Then Carly stood, her chair screeching against the floor. "You are so selfish," she spat, moving closer. Before I could react, her hand struck my cheek, the sting sharp and searing. She grabbed my arm, shoving me toward the door. "Get out of my house," she shrieked, as if my home were hers. I stumbled backward, tripping over the threshold, and fell onto the lawn, my arms scraping the concrete. Martha and David remained motionless, their faces blank. They didn't utter a single word of protest. I pulled myself up, tasting blood from my lip and staring at the closed door. Something inside me snapped. "This game is over," I whispered to myself, wiping the dirt off my sleeve. I drove to a nearby coffee shop, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. My phone lit up with a text from my colleague Sarah Jones. "Are you okay? Call me." I dialed her number, my voice low as I recounted the dispute. "They want the house, Sarah. They believe it's their own." Her response was unwavering. "You have to protect what belongs to you, Eleanor. Start digging." That night, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop, pulling up the house's deed and Grandma Beatrice's will. I wasn't going to surrender without a fight. The next morning, I sat at my desk, the sting from Carly's slap still fresh on my cheek. My laptop screen glowed with the deed to the home Grandma Beatrice Sterling and Grandpa Arthur Sterling left me. Their words from the will resonated in my mind. "Eleanor, you showed us genuine love." I was not going to let my sister or parents take that away. I opened a browser, pulling up property records for our Seattle neighborhood. The house, valued at $200,000 when I inherited it 3 years ago, was now worth nearly $1 million. The tech boom had turned our street into a bustling market. My hands steadied as I recognized the power I held. I called Sarah Jones, my colleague and closest confidant. Her voice was sharp over the phone. "Eleanor, you need to secure this. They're counting on you to give in." She recommended a lawyer she knew, a property expert named Laura Miller. I called Laura, explaining the situation, my sister's demand, my parents' silence, the house. "Send me the will and deed," Laura said briskly. "Washington law is unambiguous about inheritance. Let's see what we're dealing with." By noon, I had emailed her the documents, my fingers trembling not from fear but from resolve. Laura called back that same afternoon. "Good news," she said. "The will is ironclad, signed with 3 witnesses and a doctor's note confirming your grandparents' mental clarity. Your parents and sister have been living there without permission. Technically, they're squatting." I leaned back, astonished. Squatting? Carly had been staying in the guest room, claiming it was her office for her failing fitness app. Martha and David often stayed over, acting as if the house were theirs. Laura continued, "You can issue a 72-hour eviction notice under state law, or sell it outright. It's your decision." I dug deeper, pulling up old emails from Martha. Months ago, she'd asked about the house's wiring, claiming Carly needed a reliable internet connection for her startup. David had texted about the garage, saying it would be perfect for Carly's equipment. It hit me. They had been plotting this for months, assuming I would just acquiesce. I remembered Grandma Beatrice's voice, calm but firm, one evening when I was 16. We'd sat in her garden, debugging code on her ancient desktop. "You are tougher than they think, Eleanor," she'd said, her hands steady on the keyboard. "Don't let their noise drown you out." Grandpa Arthur had nodded, fine-tuning a circuit board. "Forge your own path, kid." Sarah met me for coffee that evening at a cafe near Pike Place Market. "This is your moment," she said, stirring her latte. "They've taken enough your college fund, your time, your peace. Demand what is rightfully yours." I nodded, my determination hardening. Back home, I spread out the documents, the will, deed, and a market analysis I'd generated through my real estate app. The figures were clear. Selling the house to a young family, the Chen family, for $850,000 was a done deal, with papers signed just last week. I hadn't told my family, knowing they would oppose it. I drafted a strategy with Laura. We would send a package to the house, including certified copies of the will, the sale contract, and an eviction notice. The Chens, a couple with 2 children, loved the garden and the smart home system I'd programmed. They were set to move in the next month. I imagined Carly's smug face when she opened that package, Martha's panic, and David's silence crumbling. For 30 years, I had been the one to yield, to step aside. Not this time. Sitting with those documents, my mind wandered to the years of being neglected in our Seattle home. As I grew up, my grandparents, Beatrice Sterling and Arthur Sterling, were my foundation. Their cozy house with its worn porch and vibrant garden was the place I felt truly valued. They would sit me down at their old PC, teaching me to code simple games, their patience limitless. "You have a spark, Eleanor," Grandma Beatrice would say, her eyes bright. Grandpa Arthur would chuckle, adjusting a motherboard. "Keep building, kid. You'll outshine them all." Meanwhile, my parents, Martha Vance and David Vance, poured everything into my sister, Carly Vance, 3 years my elder. When I was 15, I needed a laptop for a coding camp. Martha said, "We're low on funds." A week later, Carly received a brand new MacBook for her startup ideas. I worked weekends at a coffee shop to buy a used Dell, its keys sticky from overuse. At 16, Carly was given a shiny SUV for her birthday while I rode the city bus, my backpack heavy with library books. "Carly has big dreams," David would say, dismissing my straight-A report cards. "You're fine, Eleanor." That word "fine" burned. My college fund was another casualty. At 18, I found out it had disappeared into Carly's first app venture, a social media platform that failed in for months. "Unexpected expenses," Martha mumbled when I asked. I worked 30 hours a week through college, freelancing to cover tuition, still earning a 3.8 GPA in computer science. Carly dropped out of 2 different universities, each time with my parents' excuses and cash for her next vision. I would call Grandma Beatrice, my voice shaky, venting about the injustice. They're blind to your worth. One night when I was 17, I sat on their porch, tears streaming after Martha canceled my science fair trip to fund Carly's coding boot camp. Grandpa Arthur handed me a soldering iron. Fix what's broken, Eleanor, starting with yourself. Their belief in me was my lifeline. When they passed away 3 years ago, there will left me the house with a letter in Beatrice's neat handwriting. Eleanor, you gave us love when others only took. This house is yours to protect. Carly scoffed at the reading, flipping her hair. Good luck with that old place. I poured my savings into the house, programming a smart system to control lights and security, and preserving the garden Beatrice cherished. Carly, meanwhile, accumulated debt on her fitness app, always expecting a bailout. Martha and David never questioned her. Their praise was endless. Carly's a risk taker, they would say, ignoring my late-night coding sessions to meet work deadlines. I would overhear them at holiday dinners whispering about giving Carly the house for stability. Stability. As if I hadn't earned it. The final straw was a memory from 2 years ago. I'd found an old photo of me and Beatrice in the garden, her arm around me, both of us smiling. Tucked behind it was another note from her. Eleanor, you're the one who carries our love forward. Don't let them steal your fire. That note, now in my desk drawer, fueled my anger as I sat with the deed. For 30 years, I'd been pushed aside, my efforts ignored, my inheritance targeted. Carly's slap wasn't just physical. It was the culmination of their entitlement. I wasn't just protecting a house. I was reclaiming my self-worth. Back at my apartment, I finalized the plan with Laura. The house sale to the Chens, the young couple with 2 children, was finalized at $850,000, with papers signed and notarized. Laura had prepared a package of certified copies of Grandma Beatrice's will, the sale contract, and a 72-hour eviction notice under Washington law. This will hit them hard, she said over the phone, her voice calm but firm. They've been squatting illegally. You're within your rights. I nodded, picturing Carly's smug grin fading. I overnighted the package to the house, my hands steady as I handed it to the courier. The next day, I left Seattle for a work conference in Portland, needing some distance. My phone stayed on silent, but I knew the storm was coming. Sarah texted, "Package delivered. Brace yourself." By evening, my voicemail was flooded. Martha's first message was shaky. "Eleanor, what is this about a sale? Call me now." Carly's was pure venom. "You're not getting away with this." David left. A single, gruff message, "We need to talk." I ignored all of them, focusing on my conference keynote, a pitch for my budgeting app. It felt like a small rebellion, prioritizing my work over their chaos. 2 days later, Laura called with an update. "They opened the package," she said. "Your mother has been calling my office nonstop, claiming it's a mistake. Carly's hired a lawyer, some guy named Michael Davis." I smirked, knowing the will's strength. 3 witnesses, a doctor's note untouchable after 3 years under Washington's statute of limitations. "Let them try," I told Laura. "What's next?" She explained the eviction process. The Chens would take possession in 3 weeks, and the sheriff could enforce the notice if my family resisted. "They're in a panic," she added. "Carly is screaming about her rights to the house." I pictured the scene at the house, Carly pacing the living room she'd claimed as her office, ripping open the package to find the sale contract. Martha clutching the will, her face pale as she read Beatrice's words, naming me the sole heir. David, silent as always, staring at the eviction notice. They had assumed I'd surrender, hand over the house like I'd handed over my college fund, my time, my dignity. But I'd learned from Beatrice's quiet strength, her lessons in standing firm. "You don't owe them anything," she told me once, her hand squeezing mine as we debugged code together. Carly's lawyer called me that afternoon, his tone slick. "My client believes there's been a misunderstanding," Michael said. "The house is a family asset." I cut him off. "The will states it's mine. Check the records," he stammered, mentioning a possible contest. "You're 3 years too late," I said, my voice cold. "The sale is final. Tell Carly to start packing." Laura confirmed later that Michael had backed off, admitting the case was dead on arrival. Washington law didn't bend for entitled siblings. I stayed in Portland for another day, letting my family stew. Sarah sent updates. Carly had posted a rant on social media, calling me a traitor. Martha tried to rally cousins, claiming I had stolen their legacy. I didn't respond. The Chens, unaware of the drama, emailed me a thank you note, gushing about the garden and the smart system I'd coded. Our kids can't wait to move in, they wrote. I smiled, knowing Beatrice and Arthur would have loved their excitement. Back in Seattle, I met Sarah at a diner near my office. They're falling apart, she said, sipping her coffee. Carly's lawyer dropped her. Your parents are begging for a meeting. I shook my head. No meetings. They made their choice. I'd spent decades swallowing their demands, but the eviction notice was my line in the sand. Carly's slap. Their silence, it had all led here. I wasn't just selling a house. I was breaking free. 3 days after the package arrived, the fallout began. Carly's lawyer, Michael Davis, sent a final email admitting defeat. Washington's 3-year statute of limitations on will contests had expired, and the notarized documents were unbreakable. The Chens, the new buyers, were set to move into the house in 18 days. Carly, Martha, and David had 72 hours to vacate, or the sheriff would get involved. Laura called me at my Portland hotel, her voice steady. They're out of options, Eleanor. The house is legally gone. I leaned back, a quiet satisfaction settling in. For once, their entitlement had no power. Back in Seattle, Carly's world unraveled. Her fitness app startup, already struggling with missed loan payments, collapsed when creditors caught wind of her unstable living situation. The bank seized her assets under Washington's lien laws, leaving her with nothing but a lease car and a mountain of debt. She posted a desperate plea on social media, portraying herself as a victim of my greed. Cousins and aunts flooded my inbox with accusations, repeating her story. I forwarded them the will and sale contract, letting Grandma Beatrice's words speak for themselves. Most fell silent, their support for Carly fading as the truth emerged. Martha and David faced their own judgment. To cover Carly's startup loans, they had refinanced their own home 2 years ago, a risky move in Seattle's volatile market. With the house gone and no bailout from me, they couldn't keep up with the payments. They filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, a public record that made the local news. Their suburban home, once a status symbol, was foreclosed upon. They moved into a cramped rental apartment downtown, their social circle shrinking as friends distanced themselves from the scandal. Martha's book club stopped inviting her. David's golf buddies canceled their outings. I watched from a distance. Back at my Seattle apartment, Sarah met me for lunch at a cafe near Lake Union, her eyes wide as she scrolled through the latest headlines. Carly's posting about moving into a motel, she said, shaking her head. Your parents' foreclosure is all over the neighborhood forum. I sipped my coffee, feeling no guilt. For 32 years, they'd taken from me my college fund, my opportunities, my peace. Now their choices had built their own prison. Grandma Beatrice's voice echoed in my mind from a night we'd coded a light sensor for her garden. Actions have consequences, Eleanor, she'd said, wiring a circuit. Yours and theirs. Carly tried calling once, her voice cracking through a voicemail. You've ruined me, Eleanor. Where am I supposed to go? I didn't reply. She'd sealed her fate when she raised her hand against me, when she demanded what wasn't hers. Martha sent texts begging for a meeting to fix this. I blocked her number. David left a message, his tone flat. You've gone too far. I deleted it without a second thought. Their attempts to make me feel guilty felt hollow, a last gasp of control slipping away. The local paper ran a story on the house sale, mentioning the family dispute without using my name. Neighbors who'd seen me tend Beatrice's garden for years sent supportive emails. Your grandparents would be proud, one wrote. The Chens sent photos of their kids playing in the yard, the roses blooming more brightly than ever under their care. I smiled, knowing the house was alive with new memories, just as Beatrice and Arthur had wanted. Sarah and I toasted at the cafe, clinking glasses of iced tea. You rewrote the script, she said, grinning. They thought they'd break you. I nodded, my chest light. The dominoes had fallen, not because I pushed, but because they had constructed a house of cards. Carly's slap, their silence, their greed, it had all led to this. I wasn't taking pleasure in their pain, but I wasn't bearing it either. For the first time, I felt truly free. 2 months later, I stood in my new bungalow in Seattle, sunlight streaming through the windows. The small house, nestled in an up-and-coming neighborhood, was half the size of Grandma Beatrice's, but it was perfect for me. I'd painted the walls a soft gray, hung a photo of Beatrice and Arthur in the garden, and planted rose cuttings from their old yard. With the $850,000 from the house sale, I'd invested in my dream, an education app teaching children to code, partnered with Sarah Jones. I launched it last month, and early downloads were climbing fast. My new life felt like a clean slate. I'd severed all ties with my family. My sister, Carly Vance, had spiraled further after losing her startup. With her assets seized, she couldn't afford her lease car or motel rent. Last I heard, she was working part-time at a coffee shop, living in a shared apartment with strangers, her social media silent. Seattle's tough job market offered no mercy. For her lack of experience, my parents, Martha Vance and David Vance, were hit even harder. Their Chapter 7 bankruptcy stripped them of their suburban home, forcing them into a tiny rental near the city's edge. Their social standing crumbled. Martha's book club dropped her, and David's former colleagues avoided him. A local blog mentioned their foreclosure, tying it to family mismanagement. They'd become pariahs in their own circles. I didn't gloat, but I didn't mourn either. Their choices favoring Carly, ignoring me, demanding my inheritance had built this outcome. Grandma Beatrice's lessons rang clear. Your worth isn't their approval, she'd said, showing me how to debug code under her porch light. Arthur's gruff advice, stand tall kid, echoed as I built my app. Their love, not my family's, was my true foundation. I blocked Martha's last text, a plea to talk it out. Carly's final voicemail, accusing me of betrayal, went straight to trash. David hadn't reached out since the eviction notice was delivered. My app's success grew. A Seattle tech conference invited me to speak, and I shared the stage with coders I had admired for years. Sarah cheered from the front row, her grin wide, as I demoed the app's features. You're killing it, she said later over drinks at a downtown bar. Beatrice would be so proud. I nodded, thinking of the nights I'd coded with her, her steady voice guiding me. The app wasn't just a job. It was my way of passing on her belief in building something meaningful. One evening, I drove past the old house. The Chens had settled in, their kids' bikes leaning against the fence, roses blooming more beautifully than ever. A new sign hung by the gate, naming the garden after Beatrice. I didn't stop, just slowed enough to take it all in.